Good day and welcome back to another DBZ Dokkan Metal video. In this video we're going to be taking a look at, well, the Esbr for the Storied Figures. Now Storied Figures is a very debatable category. It's one of those categories that really they made, I think, when they were just getting super excited about making categories. And they almost just, wanted to constantly, like, make, categories and push categories and do things with categories. And for me, it wasn't really a category that needed to exist. So that was the first thing that I would say is the thing with Storied Figures. For me, not really my top choice in terms of category. In terms of the actual functionality, also what is super important is that in ESBR we obviously have a tendency to want to push for things like, for example, making sure that we have stuns, attack lowering, all those sort of things, because it's going to be so helpful. Now the Storied Figures team that I'm running does deal with that pretty nicely. So the Storied Figures team that I'm looking at actually does that very good. Basically, it's really honestly quite solid. You have stuns from the Int Boo, you have stuns from Strength Kid Boo, you have stuns from the transform state of the Tech Evil Boo. So it's only really the two DKPs who don't have stuns, and they still have their own utility, orb changing, things like that. So for me, right off the bat, looking at everything, I 100% feel like the biggest advantage that this team has is its utility. So its utility, its strength, its like overall ability to stun and prevent the opponent from doing things is really where it comes in clutch. Of course, that doesn't mean that it's perfect. We don't have super high volume damage dealers, so we're not dealing with some super high volume damage dealers. We have very few units that can shunt out 20, 30, 40 million, and that is a problem. Most times you will have units that at the very least can hit 20, 30, 40 mil, and nowadays that's kind of the norm. So when you're looking at these units, immediately that is a problem. You don't have the same capacity for damage that potentially other units would have. So we're very heavily reliant on the two Demon King Piccolos, which is weird to say, and the Strength Kid Buu, who is a solid unit in terms of damage output, providing of course that he is dealing like consistent damage without big bad bosses, which he doesn't really have. So it's all quite a difficult one. I actually think Storied Figures is quite challenging because it does have a very difficult setup in terms of team. So because of that, you also have the biggest struggle, I say, around the second turn, because you don't have the big time damage dealer that's going to be one-shotting the opposition. In fact, you actually struggle to get rid of them at all, and because you are splitting your damage, because you are splitting your stuns, splitting your damage, splitting all of those things, it actually becomes even more difficult, because then you're in the situation where you're not necessarily prioritizing singular targets. So what I suggest is ensuring you focus and prioritize same color orbs, and then what you can do is you can of course get the Dokkan attack, which will help you to produce some AoE damage, which will help to alleviate some of the concerns that you have regarding damage and damage overflow. So that's definitely the strategy there. For the final boss, look, things are a little bit different. For the final boss, generally speaking, we're looking at essentially keeping him stun locked. So keeping him stun locked, focusing in on him, making sure that he's, not really able to do anything. This is where the transformed evil Boo and good Boo combination is going to do the most work, because they are essentially, for lack of a better term, going to stun and seal him, which is always incredibly helpful in this situation. Then during that time you can transform AGL Demon King Piccolo and just standard Demon King Piccolo, and you can have all of them put in some decent work, stunning, doing damage, etc., and starting to really whittle the boss down. If you want to, you can prioritize, kind of like pushing the units off rotation to keep the stuns up. But generally I found that it was honestly a very straightforward situation, and that really it was a simple, albeit somewhat challenging event. Like, it just required a lot of patience, management of stuns, management of everything else, and then eventually we got there, which was all very, very, very important. So yeah, it was a challenge, but at the end of the day I think it was a simple one that produced some good results. So for me, I think it was no real star in this one, but I think that is pretty much it. Bye.